So let's try to check that out in the cheapest way that I know, and this is also the way that I work. So here's the deal. Today we're gonna try to make a tutorial in how to make emotes, right? So the idea is to make an emote by yourself, if you want to. If you are tired of the big emote industry to charge you those incredibly high prices for your emotes, then you want to make your own. Why not? So let's try to check that out in the cheapest way that I know, and this is also the way that I work. I use a software named Krita. That'll be Krita. And this is an open source software with a very robust community and tutorials and resources. You can find everything on their page, which I believe is krita.org. You can find the software there, download it, and start working. But the other thing that you might need, you can use your mouse if you want to, but the other thing that you might need is just a drawing tablet. You don't need to get like the most expensive drawing tablet ever. You can get something very, very cheap if you want to start and try. A cheaper one that might be around $30, 30 euro. That's enough for you to work on emotes, and you don't have to spend a lot of money. But you can also work with your mouse if you prefer. So there are very expensive tablets, the ones that have like the screen on the tablet and things like that. You can connect with your HDMI ports and it work as a second monitor. Like a lot of things like that. You don't need that. You don't need any of that. All you need is something very cheap. You can get, this one is a good brand, the Huion, 20 euro. This is another good brand, the XP pen. That's 30 bucks. Like, just get something cheap. The Wacom one, it's great. That's what I usually recommend to people. I do have my gripes with the company, but the Wacom one, this is the one. 38 euro, 39 euro. It's a pretty good tablet. It's really good quality. You don't need more than this. If you want to invest on a tablet, you don't need to either. You can use your mouse, but it's much more comfortable. So the one that I have is a very old tablet. And that's what I'm saying, you don't need anything fancy. I have a Wacom as well. My tablet is an Intuos Pro Medium, but it's from 2011 or something. It's a very old tablet, but the surface is bigger though. The surface is bigger, but it's an older tablet. You don't need more than that. The thing, my pen, here's my stylus, and you have two buttons that are very much used, and we're going to talk about them a little bit later. But I also use the two buttons a lot. And I use my keyboard, particularly Shift, Control, and Alt at the same time. So yeah, my left hand I use for my keyboard, my right hand for my pen and the two buttons, essentially. What files can you import into Krita? That is a good question, but we can check it out. So if you want to import something, you can import video animation, meaning that you can import a GIF and see the frames if you want to. You can also import animation frames already, and you can open all these supported formats. So you can import GIMP brushes or JPEGs or, you know, PDFs, PNGs, anything you want, BMPs, TIFFs, TGAs, like anything you want, basically. It's really robust. You can also recommend the XP Pen Deco 03. There you go, if you want some wireless. That's a good recommendation. Thank you, Mako. Krita is a painting software first and foremost. You can also animate, and it's pretty robust. For emotes is all we need. Let's get started then. So, the first thing you're going to see when you open Krita, by the way, this is version 5.2.2. So anything, I would recommend you anything after version 5.0, because in version 5.0 is when they implemented animation and the timeline. So anything after that, it's really good. You're going to start, the first thing you're going to see is like, you know, all the news and all the things from Krita, whatever. You're going to open and create a new image. So you're going to make an emote. We have to assume that you're going to make a standard emote, nothing animated, just a standard emote. So you go to new image, and you're going to have this prompt here to choose the size of the document and the different layers that are included. So normally these are my settings for a standard emote. You need to know that the size of the emotes for Twitch need to be 112 pixels by 112 pixels. If you are doing badges, then you need 28 by 28, 56 by 56, and 112 by 112. With emotes, you can go up to 120 pixels. Now, Twitch does a conversion if you want. You can have bigger size emotes, and Twitch will compress and create the emote once you upload it. That's why we don't work entirely or all the time in 120 by 120 or 112 by 112. We don't do that because it's really small and really difficult. So you don't want that. You want to then convert and make it smaller, not work on that type of canvas. Unless, and this is like the only exception to that rule, if you are doing pixel art. But for pixel art, there are better programs that you want to work on. You could do it in Krita, but there are better programs out there. So we are also assuming you are not doing pixel art, just regular, painting. So we start, my recommended settings is 600 by 600. That's going to be our canvas. We are going to convert that later on. But 600 by 600. A resolution of 300 dpi is good. You want this in case at some point you want to upscale this, or you want to print it somewhere, or you want to make stickers out of it. It is better to have a higher resolution so you have more pixels per, square inch on your piece, which translates into better, higher quality printing. We're gonna keep the model as RGB alpha and the 8-bit integer scaler. That's what we're gonna keep. Now for the content, you are going to have, I believe, 3 layers, and the background color is gonna be white. You can change this, so the settings from now on will be different and will be the default every time you start a new project. This is what I came up with because I am colorblind. So for me, it's very difficult to see my brush on the white, super bright background. So I use this color as my background, and I start always with 4 layers, just because we are going to be using a shit ton of layers. So anyways, this is up to you, and just know that this is going to be saved as your default settings in the future. Keep the dimensions, as I said, 600 by 600, and we're ready to start. So the first thing you're going to see after you click and start on your project is something like this, except, like I said, your background is going to be white. But for the rest, this is what you're going to be seeing, more or less. I try to keep my Krita very vanilla. And you don't need extra brushes, you don't need a lot of extra things to work on a good emote or to work on your own art. You really don't. So let's take a look at the tools that we have and how my workspace is efficient for what I do. The first thing that you want after you start and you select your canvas, you're gonna see your workspace. Now you need to be comfortable with your workspace. You need to know where things are, and you need to be comfortable where those things are so you can access them at any time. That is best. The more familiar you get with the software, with the shortcuts, with even the key bindings if you want to create some, the more efficient you're gonna be in your work. And if you are comfortable, then things are going to show in your final art as well. It is what it is. So practice a lot, just get familiar with the thing and set things up the way you want it to set things. So the first thing we do is go to settings, check on Dockers, and here are the different docks that you can put around in your workspace if you feel like you're gonna use them. But the ones that I would totally recommend you have is the advanced color selector, the brush presets, the layers. This is fundamental. If you want to record your process, if you want to have those little time lapses that people sometimes post in social media, then a recorder is fine. Your tool options, which is also fundamental, and your toolbox. That's pretty much all of them. And that's all those are all we use, essentially, right? So, and the way that I set it up, like, again, you can take your Dockers and move them around if you want to. You can put them in a different position, different place in the whole desk. Whatever works for you, just put them there. This is the way it works for me. This is what I do. The advanced color selector, the tool options. Now, the tool options is incredibly useful. I always recommend people to have the tool options. Why is the tool option so important? Now, the tool options will change depending on the tool that you have selected on your left. So this is all your tools. You have the brushes, you know, squares and straight lines and some vector, text. You got the fill, the bucket. You got you know, reference images. You got your magic wands, your mask tools. All of those things are here on the left. And depending on what you choose, as you can see on the top right corner, your tool options will change and adapt to that and give you a deeper control of the thing that you're doing. So, something I want to show you, for instance. Let's say that you make a line here, right? You're painting on that layer. So if you go now, like we make a line, and if we go to the tool options, you can see that these are the options for your brush. The default ones and the ones that you would normally be using are just weighted. The distance and the stroke ending, that's something that you don't need to touch really. You can have the option of smooth pressure, and that works very well because the brush that we're using right now is using the pressure that we put on our tablet. Right? So little pressure, more and more and more pressure and more pressure and more pressure until you have this. So you can have very thin lines depending if you're just touching the tablet, or you can have like super giga thick lines. That's just because of the pressure. That's why having a pen is recommended. With the mouse, you can't really replicate that. It's gonna always go at the highest level. Now, if you're using a mouse though, you can use a tool here in the brush tools called stabilizer. Now, the stabilizer, what it does, as you can see now, my tool here, my brush, has two circles. The internal one is the brush. The external one is basically a safe zone. It's a safe zone, as you can see, where I can move. I'm clicking right now and I'm holding my click. As long as I'm inside this circle, my safe zone, you're not really drawing anything. But if you start moving, the circle will move and the brush will follow, which will give you a sense of lag when you're doing this. But in the long term, it's gonna be great for shaky lines. Now, if I do the same with the pen, you're gonna see what I'm talking about in a better way. As you can see, my brush, and I have all this distance between the edge and the brush, which helps a lot because it's laggy, but it helps a lot to stabilize your lines. You can also select the delay here in pixels. How big is that safe zone gonna be? And all of these things. So if you want a bigger one, then you just up your delay, and then the circle is gonna be bigger, and you know, the other way around. So that is what I would recommend if you're just using a mouse. Stabilizer is also used if you want to basically trace something under, and you want to be like a perfect line. That works perfectly. Anyways, that's why tool options is so important, and we're gonna be coming to it every time. Now, the advanced color selector is also very important. The version that I use is the square. Maybe the one that you have has different components, right? I use the HSV, which is values that go from black to white, and black being the most saturated. So this is the one that I use. These are my settings. You can also change, you know, different behavior for the colors. We're not going to really touch any of that. But the way it works is you got the circle outside that will give you the color. Say in this case, we have some sort of red. On your left, bottom left is black. Bottom right is black. Top left is white. the color should be in between. The more top right you go, the more saturated your color is gonna be. So the upper you go, the more saturation you get. And if you get closer to this is the most saturated red you can get. If you go down in saturation, then you just go towards the black. It's a least saturated color. If you start going in the middle, it is the same color. It's just different shades of it. It's different grades of saturation that you're using here. So that's why we use the advanced color selector. I am also colorblind, like I said earlier, so I'm gonna be depending a lot on the color selector for many things. The other menus that we have is the layer menu. This is very, very important because you are drawing on layers. The way this works is like ogres. Now, the way this works is essentially each layer. Imagine a transparent sheet of paper. So you got a sheet of paper that is absolutely transparent until you draw something in it, right? As you can see, we are here on layer 3 right now on the right side, and that's what we're drawing, right? If I go to layer 2 and do something different, as you can see, they all are dependent on the position that they have. So they all work as stacked sheets of paper, right? So in this case, layer 3 is on top of layer 2. But if I move layer 3 under layer 2, the whole thing changes. So just always keep in mind that the to the top is the one that the one closer to you, and then you have the background ones that go under. So always remember that. The cool thing is that if you're working on layers, you can remove them. Well, I mean, you can stop seeing them if you want to. You can hide them. You can change their opacity if you want to. You can move them around individually without affecting what's in the background. You can change their sizes too if you want to. Change their rotation as well if you wanted to, without affecting the other one, right? And that is vital for the things that we're doing, because when you paint, and let me show you the example. Let's say that you're working on an emote, right? So you have this this guy, right? And you finish with the tracing. You have all the outlines. You're like, okay, I'm ready. Now I need to paint my emote. How do we paint this guy? And you're working only with one layer, and you're gonna paint, right? So you start painting. You're like, okay, I'm painting this guy. This guy's great and whatever. But you're getting closer to the outlines. What do? Now, what do you do here? Because if you paint here, you're painting on top of your line, essentially destroying what you did. So you could be, hear me out, you could be very careful and get super close and paint really close to the lines that you already made. But you have to be super good with your pen, really precise, and then keep doing it for everything that you're doing. Now, that is absolutely not a good idea. It's a terrible idea. Do not do that. So what you do is that you create a new layer. You go here and you click on the plus. If you want to know exactly what you're creating, so click on the little arrow and you add a paint layer. We're not worrying about a group layer, clones, vectors, nothing like that. Just a new paint layer. You move it around. You rename it by double clicking. You can rename, and this is going to be outlines. And we go to the other one, and this is going to be colors. And now you come to the colors, and now you can paint on the guy. And as you can see, it doesn't really matter because the guy is in front. So now you don't have to be that careful, right? You can do this. And now it's much faster. Right? That's much faster. So that's exactly what you want. Just be more efficient. We want to be more efficient. How am I changing the size of my brush? So this that goes from like small to super big is because of the pressure of my pen, yeah. But I will explain that in a little bit, Agnosis. Also because there is a way of changing your actual size of the brush. So that's also a thing that we can do. No need to worry too much about it. But we will explain that as well. So yeah, you get your guy and he's very happy and whatnot. So there you go. And you're just like working in layers. And that is why we use them. They are very, very important. So that's why we keep our layers menu always here. The last one is the brushes. Now, you can see that I have a shit ton of brushes here. You got a lot of brushes. I gotta tell you, like I said earlier, the idea is to make it as easy as possible, you know, as cheap as possible. So we use an open source software. We use the cheapest tablet you can find. But also, in terms of the resources that we use from the program, we also use something very basic. For most, if not all of your emote purposes, you need 2 brushes. And both come with Krita. You don't need to download anything else. You don't need to go crazy with brushes. You just don't. The brushes that we're going to be using and that you should be using for most of your emotes as well, if you want to simplify things, are the basic 1 brush and the basic 5 brush. So yeah, basic 1 is the main brush for things that we don't need sizes to change. Simple brush that doesn't change sizes with pressure. Is always the same line. Every time, the same line, the same thickness. So normally we're gonna be using that when we go into making outlines for our emote for, you know, the sake of visibility on Twitch. Mostly. And basic 5, which is the one that I was showing you earlier, that is the brush that is sensitive to pressure. That the size changes depending on how hard we press on our tablet. So we are going to be using that one quite a bit for pretty much everything else. Now it's time for some of the control. How you control Krita, how do you move around? How do you do this in a faster way? Why can you rotate your canvas but I can't? All these things are, all these questions are very common when I do emotes on stream, when I make emotes on stream. So I want to explain that a little bit. So in the control topic, this is actually very important because there's a lot of questions that come from how do you do this? How do you move your canvas? How do you zoom in, zoom out? How do you rotate? How do you, you know, in a way that is efficient and fast and you don't waste a lot of time trying to circumvent certain things. And that is one of the biggest advantages of digital drawing, is that you don't have to struggle a lot with moving your hand in weird positions or, you know, like locating yourself, contouring yourself just in order to make a line. You can move your canvas and make it work for you. And that is really simple in Krita. The first thing is your mouse is going to be your best friend as well. Your mouse, and if not, your pen. Like I said earlier, your pen should have 2 buttons. And we're using them constantly. My left hand is always on my keyboard, right? And I combine just different buttons in order to make it move. I don't change any hotkeys in Krita. I don't create any new ones. I use the basic ones, and as I wanted to work for the program in that sense, so I could, you know, tell people what to do in a default settings environment without me changing too much. The first thing is the control key. So the control key is particularly useful to select colors. So as you can see, this is me on the let me make a line or two. We can make this line, and then let me make I don't know, this line. The control key, if you just press control while holding your pen, no other button, just control, you're gonna get this tool. This tool will allow you to select or pick any color that you can click on. So for instance, I am right now making lines in this color, but what if I want to go back and make lines with this color again, and I don't remember what's the code or how to go back to it. So I just press Control, click on it, or like, you know, push the pen there on it, and now I have that color again. It's that simple. It's just that simple. So that's just Control, right? The two buttons on my pen, the one farther from the tip, is gonna be a grab. So I will be able to grab my canvas and move it around. I'm using just my pen here, move my pen around my tablet. Which is very useful if you want to relocate, if you want to move stuff around. If I combine Control and that button, suddenly I have the zoom tool. So all I'm doing is moving my pen left to right, or up and down, just to make a zoom in or zoom out, by combining Control and the farther button from the tip of the pen. Now, if I do the same, but with Shift, so Shift and this button, the one farther from the tip, I have the rotation of the canvas, which again is very useful. And I'm going to show you how that's useful. Let's say that you have, again, say that you have another character, right? This is the character that you have, and you're sketching something, and it comes to a point when, after sketching for a while, certain parts of the character need to be, you need to either get closer, which is the zoom, or you need to make it more comfortable to yourself. If I want to make a line that goes here, for instance, this kind of upwards curve, I am moving my arm in a very weird way just to make that happen. So instead of me working for it, I just rotate my canvas in a way that makes this much easier. So rotating your canvas is actually much simpler than you just rotating yourself, right? You don't want to do that. Don't work for the canvas. Make the canvas work for you, right? That is much simpler. So that's why we rotate, and that's how I do it with Shift and this button on my pen. So we got the zoom, the grab, and the rotation. Also, we have the color selector, the color picker. And that's pretty much it. If I want to erase something that I don't like, then I press E, and suddenly, as you can see right here on top, if you press E, you're now using the eraser. Right? Very convenient. And then it's up to you to memorize certain tools that and the shortcuts, just because you want to be more efficient. So in my case, for instance, if I want to move this around, I just press T, and suddenly I am in this tool here to the left, which is the move tool. So I just press T. If I want to go back to my brush, I press B. If I want to have more control over my movement, then I go Control T. And now I have the transform tool, which allows me to rotate or change the size. And if I come to the tool options there in that tool, then I can also mirror if I want to. You know, all these things that are necessary if you are working fast. Another good shortcut to know is the letter M. The letter M will mirror your canvas. Which again is useful if you are right-handed or left-handed and you're more used to certain things. So if it's more comfortable for you, then you just mirror it. But keep in mind that that is not a permanent mirror. That is just for you. That is just visual for you to work on. It's the letter M. Do the gestures work on the tablet? You use 2 fingers, tap to undo. I think that's something that you can configure. For instance, right now I'm doing the 2 fingers, and I'm like doing this to zoom in. That is something that you can configure from your own tablet. All tablets are different, but I believe that that's something that you can configure from your tablet. Let me see if I can do that right now. I can show you, because I probably can. Wacom. Yeah, so you can come to your tablet properties. In my case, the Wacom, so I can come here and I can just like map stuff or change what they do, right? So in my pen, the farther from the tip, the button farther from the tip is a double click, and the other one is a modifier. So that's how I configure it. And I guess you can come to touch and then change the gestures and things like that. So I guess yes, you can. It takes all the gestures and things that you normally would do or have configured in your tablet already. So those are the basic things. Now we have movement, now we have the layers and the explanation of what they're for, we have the colors, and we have the tools. These are the things that I use normally. You don't need more. 2 brushes is more than enough, and now you're basically ready. We need to know now some of the tools that we're going to be using here on the left. What are the tools? What are the tools that we're going to be using? What are these things on the left? What do you use them for? When? It might be confusing. It might be a little overwhelming at first. Don't be overwhelmed. You're not going to be using them all. You don't need them all. The first thing, of course, and the most important one that we're going to be using is the brush. That is the shortcut B on your keyboard. And that is this tool here. And that is basically your main tool to draw anything. You don't really need to go much deeper than that. So your brush, as we saw, it depends on different strokes that you take on your tablet or with your mouse. You can use any of those, and that is okay. Now, the problem with the brush is probably going to be, and at first mostly, it's going to be how shaky your lines are going to be. So if I tell you to draw a circle, depending on how big and how much pressure you have to put, your circle might not be like that. And maybe you're going to be struggling a lot with the circle, and you're going to be like, that is normal. That's okay. It's all practice. If you have to make a line, like a straight line, or as straight as possible, then you're probably going to be struggling a lot with those two. And that is all an exercise. So this thing, I would say, do this as an exercise. Draw lines as an exercise. Just lift your hand. Don't move. Don't use your wrist. Use your arm. And just start drawing lines. Try to make them parallel. Sorry. Just try to make this over and over and over in different angles. Use your arm, don't use your wrist. Why? Because your wrist is limited in motion. If I try to do the same only using my wrist, this is what happens. You can see that it starts to curve. But also, it's gonna hurt at some point. It's gonna hurt you. So don't do that. It's really gonna hurt. Just use your arm. The entire thing, because your range is much bigger that way, right? Also practice with other things too. Practice with a lot of different little doodles and circles, and just do one after the other until you feel more comfortable with them, and as many as you can. Go fast, just do many. This is good. You can also try to do many as this and create other different shapes. Again, until you are much more comfortable with the lines that you're making, because it's gonna be shaky at first. If you are definitely too shaky, for whatever reason, maybe you have a condition, maybe, you know, it's you're still practicing, but you still want to do something. There is a very good tool in Krita. We saw earlier about the stabilizer, but also there is a different tool, which is called the dynamic brush. It's here, 4 spots under your regular brush. Click on the dynamic brush. Your dynamic brush basically will give you a little bit of lag. It is a little laggy. It feels a little weird, but it is perfect if you are tracing something. particularly something with curves, because you will be able to follow, and the program, the software, will correct some of the shakiness for you, allowing you for, you know, much better type of lines, much less shaky. So those tools are fundamental. If you want to make something more predetermined, because it's more like a perfect shape or whatnot, then you can use a circle, you can use the square. Now for this ones in particular, I like to go back to my basic one brush because it's uniform, so I'm not going to struggle with any type of line size by making my circle. And I tend to put those on a very small pixel, like 3 or so pixels, so you can have always a square with the same width of line. Because if I do it with my regular one, which is at 22.9023 pixels, that's what I recommend, then these are the lines that I'm going to be making. Because these tools work with the big size of the brush. They're not dependent on pressure, except for the line. The straight line is. So you can make a straight line, and depending on the pressure, you can have this. And that is why I recommend people, if you're going to be using anything like the straight line, the square, or the circle, go with the brush one, go with a predetermined small size, and now you're going to have all the lines that you want that are always going to be the same. Now back to pixels. The pixels that I use for the brush, for the dynamic brush that I use, the brush 5, that is pressure dependent, I use 22 pixels, 23 pixels. That's what I use, because that works for me in the amount of pressure that I put on my tablet. If you put much force, then I would recommend you lowering that number. If you put too little force, then I would recommend you going higher on that number until you get your determined thing. The most appropriate thing I would say for a 600 by 600 canvas for an emote is around 7 pixels for internal lines of your emote, and about 10 to 11 pixels for the 10 to 11 pixels for the outlines. Right? That's what I would recommend. This is something that I just do by eye now, by using my regular brush at 23. But that will be the recommendation in terms of pixels and numbers. Which other tools are useful? Well, things like like we said before, like the move tool. If we want to, I don't know, if we want to move stuff around. And let me show you that. Let's do this again. If you want to move stuff around, then your move tool is pretty good. You can move things around. That's very decent. If you want to modify those things, then Control T or the transform tool. You can rotate. You can change also where the pivot is. So you can rotate in different ways. Let's say that you want to rotate because it's in the neck, and you can rotate from the neck. You just move your pivot, and that should work. So those tools are important. Now, there are other tools that are equally important, like your masking. So for instance, let's say that you have a character here, right? He's also running, right? But you're like, damn it, they're on the same layer, and I wanted to have the head on a different layer because I wanted to move it, but now I can't because they're on the same layer. So what the hell do I do? Aha! This is where these masking tools will come into place. There is a very good tool called the freehand selection. You can just click on it, and with this, you can create your own mask around the things that you want to select. So in this case, let's say that I wanted just to move the head. So I just make a circle around it. As you can see, I have that. In this case, I can either press my select my move tool, and I can move the head around already. Or if I definitely want to separate it, what I can do is Control X and Control V. The program is going to cut it now as a new layer. And now that's how you effectively separate it two from the other. Obviously, it's kind of like a one last minute resort to go to, but it can help you if things are already done and you don't want to go back. Remember that when you have a selection going, what you want to do is deselect. So you will come here to select menu on top and then deselect, or Control-Shift-A, which is what I use. But you can deselect and now you're free. Now, as you can see, we have 2 layers instead of 1. So we can move the head around. We still have things to explain, but I think it's better if we start making something. So I do have a commission that I want to work on. All right, so this is where it gets interesting. You have several ways to work on Krita, at least to start. What we're gonna do is that we're gonna use this as a reference. So we're gonna take a reference, and in Krita you can do this in several different ways. Now, the first way is you just go, you Google your reference, whatever you wanna make, and you just copy your image. You can come back to Krita, and you could just paste here, Control V, change the size of it, set it to your canvas, and it's a new layer, put it under, lower the opacity, go to a different layer, and you are ready to paint on top of it. Right? That's very valid, but that's not what we're gonna do. It's the same way with sketches. So, this is the original Dangil Comfy. And this is a technique that I used for a while before going fully digital. What I was doing at the time, I was sketching all my emotes on paper. All of them. So I was just sketching on paper. I was taking a picture with my cell phone. And I was importing the picture to Krita as a layer, lowering the opacity, and then just working on it. And then making appropriate changes and you know, painting and whatnot. That's how I did it back in the day, and that's something I would recommend people to do. If you feel more comfortable drawing on paper, always draw on paper. You can take a picture, you can import that picture to Krita, and you can just trace and paint digitally. One of the ways is that you can take a picture of whatever sketch you did on paper because you're more comfortable, and then you can just trace it. The other way is you go to the sources, whatever thing you're gonna use as an inspiration, you can just copy the image. You don't have to download or anything like that. You can copy. Please do not copy directly anything that you see online. Check for copyright, credit the authors. All of these things is very important. Artists really need the support. So don't just like grab something and just copy it. If you can use things as inspiration, that's a different thing, which is something that we are going to be doing today. In the case of this emoji, we're just basically making this emoji ours. So the good tool for reference, Krita has it as well. And we're gonna be using that one. That one is a very neat tool. So you can come here to your left side. There is this little tool here. It's called Reference Images Tool. Click on that. And then you can come to your tool options. Remember how I told you to keep your tool option Docker at all times? It's because in this case, you can either import a reference picture from files that you have in your computer, or you can just copy and paste whatever you already have in your clipboard. Since we already went and copied the picture from Google search, you just come here, click on the clipboard, and you're gonna have the picture set for you. The difference is, this picture is not a layer. This picture is not part of your composition. And it's something that you can move around, change the size, change the opacity, change the saturation, rotate if you want to, or whatever else you want to do. And it's just gonna be your reference. So normally, we just put that close to our canvas, but not on top so we don't lose any visibility, right? We can make it even a little bit smaller. And that is how we use our references here. The second stage, then, finally, we're gonna make our emote, right? So we have our character. This is the character that we have to make an emote for today, or we're gonna make an emote for today. So we have a general idea how he looks like. It's a big head, it's a small body, and it has glasses and a beanie. And those components are important. So we're gonna come back here, and now it's the sketching time for this. So let's start sketching. The way I like sketching is I just select a color, whatever for you. For me, black works well. My same brush, but it's gonna be a sloppier version of what we're gonna be end up doing as an emote. We're gonna base on that, so it has to have the hands, right, at some point. So the hands can be around here and probably like around here or so. And maybe we can move that even a little bit bigger here. And then we can have the head or whatever of the character. Right. So that is essentially the first step for the sketch that we're gonna do. So now we need to start polishing the whole emote. I guess in order to keep the emotes that the way the client wants, we have to keep in mind the bigger things that the original emoji offers. So key things to consider: the hands, the big mouth, and the teary eyes. Those are like the three main things. So we can start with that. So let's start with sketching the mouth. So as you can see, the way I do the sketch is just a bunch of lines. They don't have to, in fact, be perfect by any means. You don't want them to be perfect, actually, because this is your first sketch. So ultimately, who cares, right? Right, and this is the mouth for that emote. We're gonna have a little bit of this thing here, and this is how it looks. So now we have the mouth. It has a like a big thing on the lip, right? How is his face? Okay, he's got like a more prominent chin. So we want that a little bit like this. And his face overall is kind of like squared after this part. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna remove the roundness out of it, and we're gonna make it like a little bit more square like this. Right? The eyes are very, very close. One of the things that this client likes is his character to have a nose. I don't like my characters to have a nose. I find it incredibly unnecessary. But this client is very particular about this character, and they do like their nose. So we have to keep the nose. Like I said, this is just a sketch, so it doesn't have to be perfect by any means. A character that can't smell. Yeah, that is true. And now, like, the big silly eyes that this character over there has in the emoji, whatever it's called. We're gonna try to emulate that a little bit. Remember, I'm constantly alternating between my brush and my eraser. Your eraser is your E button, your E key on your keyboard. Like I said, you don't want to copy the thing exactly. You want to make it your own, right? You want to make your own version. Copying things... why? If you can make it your own, why would you copy something that you can create? It's fine to take an inspiration or make something very, very similar. That's fine. But like copying exactly, it's why? Just make your own. It's more fun. Anyways, we have now this, which is starting to look like a decent sketch at this point. It seems like the eyes are just like big wobbly thingies here. Right? I guess we can close that gap there. Okay. And then the same thing will be here with right? We can use this line, for instance, for the beanie. We can remove these lines for the hands. We'll be back to them. They're taking space there that we don't need. I mean, that we need. Does he have an ear? He does have an ear, so I have to... Right? That's so stupid. He does have some eyebrows like this as well. With the eyebrows there. Thank you, I hate it. Anyways, this works very well for the, you know, main idea of the emote. I believe this character has a hoodie. And now the stupid hands, I guess. So we're gonna do the hands, even for the sketch, on a different, I guess, layer. So we got the chance to move it around. And, this can be higher. A little bit higher like that. And that's gonna give us a good hand. Now, the issue with this emote is that this emote doesn't have... This emote doesn't have arms. So that's gonna be a challenge for sure. We can do something like this. And then we can change this a little bit here to reflect that his arms are actually like, you know. And then the hands on this side, which look a little weird, but I guess he wants to go with that, so we're gonna try to make them as similar as possible, I guess. I'm gonna make them a little bit closer though, probably. Probably. So for this one, we get kind of something like this. Let's remove this for a second. I kind of want to make this a little bit like that, so we have an idea where this goes. And this probably goes like this. I don't like that. We're gonna make it like this better. I don't like that either. And there you go. All right, I guess then we can start working. The cool thing is, like I said, we have separate arms, you know, also for the sketch. And here is where grouping comes and saves the day. All right, so chat, we have our sketch ready, right? And this is where, this is where we go now and start tracing and just like polishing things. So, grouping is very important. Grouping for layers is very important so you don't get lost. I would always recommend you at the beginning, at least until you're confident in what you're doing and you know exactly what you're doing, to name your layers. Use a name for them. Remember, you just have to double click on them and you can change their names. So what we're going to do is that we're going to select all the layers here. You can do it by either holding shift and clicking on the first and the last, or you can do control and then click on all the appropriate ones that you want to group up. You're going to right click on it and you are going to go to the group menu and you're going to go to quick group or control G as you prefer. You do that. And at this point, everything is in a small folder, everything is grouped up, which is really convenient if you want to make things disappear, if you want to apply opacity to several layers at the same time at different levels. So that is very convenient. And groups is actually a good idea to name. So we're going to double click on it and this is going to be our sketch. We're going to name it sketch and we're going to lower the opacity because we will be tracing this